Hi. How do you feel about the band name, Taylor? Yes, I believed it was very cool. I have to be a real jerk, but the heartbeat of the rock band Foo Fighters was Taylor Hawkins. The band carried on Nirvana's tradition of pain and rebirth. Taylor was more than just a timekeeper. He had long blonde hair, playful eyes, and a loud drum set. He was like fire, enticing, wild, and sometimes careless, but deeply loving to those he cared about. Taylor was full of raw energy on stage, but behind the scenes, he was a man who had fallen more than once. He was troubled by childhood tragedies and addiction, and he was lonely as an artist and under the pressure of always having to perform. He died quickly in Colombia on the night of March 25th, 2022, just 1 hour before the show. Not only broke up the band, but it also left fans all over the world with a huge hole in their hearts. We need to go back and look at Taylor Hawkins' life to understand why he was more than just a great drummer. He was a symbol of a whole rock age. A solo that still makes people who loved him think of him. It had highs and lows, was sometimes offbeat, but was always full of fire. Early life. Taylor Hawkins was born in Fort Worth, Texas, on February 17, 1972. He is the youngest of 3 children. After that, when Taylor was 5 years old, his family moved to Laguna Beach, California. It is a beautiful beach town, but it has a lot of stresses that you can't see. His dad was like most men in the 1970s, quiet, tough, and mentally distant. But his mother, who was always kind and loving, had her own silent problems that all of the kids had to learn to deal with. According to Taylor, my mom had a bad side. My sister Heather cooked dinner and took care of everything when she passed out on the couch from being too tired. Taylor thought that his mother was the only person who really believed in his artistic abilities. While he stood in the living room singing, dancing, and acting like he was on stage, the only person in the crowd who patiently clapped was her. She was also the first person to notice how much he loved drums, and the first person to think he would do well. The other person, his father, wasn't very interested. Taylor once said that his dad never really recognized his skills or interests, not because he was mean, but because he was busy with work and raised in an age that wasn't used to showing affection. That pain is what drew Taylor to music as a way to escape. He said he was a fat, stupid kid who failed at everything once. Not good in school, not sporty, and not popular with other people. What happened was that a friend let him play an old drum kit. Taylor got hooked right away, and his friend pushed him. It was your destiny to play the drums. Soon after, his female friend's older brother joined the service and left behind a bunch of rock records. Taylor found News of the World by Queen in one of those dusty, corner-worn record sleeves, and it changed his life. He got lost in Roger Taylor's drumming and John Williams's big, orchestral music for Star Wars, Superman, and other movies. He said that the sounds were so big and intense that he felt them in his heart as well as hearing them. Taylor lived in 2 worlds at the same time in high school. They surfed during the day, play music in cover bands at night, and practiced drums by playing along with Rush, Genesis, and the Police records. At the time, glam metal was big, but Taylor liked alternative rock, especially Jane's Addiction. Their honest, rebellious sound made him feel like he finally fit somewhere. Everyone didn't think that this shy boy who failed at almost everything would find his voice through drumsticks. Few people knew that his quiet, troubled youth was what made him the artist he was. One who was fiery on stage, but very sensitive when the lights went down. Early career. Taylor Hawkins went to Venice after graduating from high school and became involved in the rough street music scene there. It would be great if young artists didn't try to become famous, but instead used sound to find freedom. That's where he and his friends started a band called Sylvia. The name of the band came from Jane's Addiction. It is rough and unpolished, but it is full of sense and hunger. One night, Sylvia played at a small Los Angeles club called Club Lingerie. Stevie Salas was in the small group of people there. He was looking for a drummer for Canadian singer Sash Jordan, who were going to open for Aerosmith on their European tour. While Salas wasn't impressed by the band as a whole, he was by the long-haired drummer who stood out because of his wild energy and strong presence. He just told them, "I need someone who understands punk and alternative, and that kid is weird," after the show. Taylor Hawkins started his first tour with Sash Jordan when he was only 22 years old, and he quickly became a star on stage. He still wasn't very good at what he did, but Jordan said he had a light and love shining from inside him. She remembered that she knew instantly when he walked into the room. There are people who make you feel like light is trickling down your spine. He was Taylor. Taylor got the attention of Steve Perry's manager, Scott Welch, while opening for Perry, the famous lead singer of Journey. Welch also worked with a rising star named Alanis Morissette. At the time, Alanis had just finished Jagged Little Pill, her big hit record, and was looking for a drummer for her world tour. Taylor was quickly asked to try out, and he and guitarist Chris Chaney quickly became important members of Alanis' live band. The next 2 years were crazy, with shows at some of the biggest venues in the world. Both the lead singer and Taylor Hawkins stood out. Hawkins had striking good looks, blonde hair that was blown out, and showman-like drums. That's not all he did. He helped make explosive versions of You Oughta Know, Hand in My Pocket, and Ironic. He once said that he decided to play behind a solo artist because it was a real band, not just her show. Alanis, please let me be authentic. I completely played music. Smith met Dave Grohl for the first time at KROQ's Almost Acoustic Christmas event in 1995. Yesterday, Foo Fighters and Alanis were both playing. In later years, Taylor said, I was just the backup drummer kid, and Dave was my Nirvana idol. However, he was very nice. We smoked and talked about Queen and the Cops. I knew right then that this person was going to change my life. At the time, nobody could have seen it coming. But that moment started one of the strongest bonds in rock history. It was also the start of a new era, as Taylor would no longer be someone else's spotlight, but the official drummer for Foo Fighters. No matter what happened in Taylor Hawkins' life, the road ahead would not be easy. Achievement in your career. In 1997, after William Goldsmith left the Foo Fighters, Dave Grohl called Taylor Hawkins and asked if he knew of any good musicians for the band. Taylor didn't think twice. He replied, yeah, I'll do it, in a short, firm, and passionate way. At that time, Alanis Morissette had already taken over the world and Foo Fighters were just getting started. But Taylor picked rock not for the money, but because it made him feel alive. That April 19, 1997, show at the Alligator Lounge in Santa Monica was his first show with Foo Fighters. It was a secret gig. From then on, he went on a trip with the band through all of their stages of growth, from being skeptics in the media to electrifying stadium shows. There Is Nothing Left to Lose, 1999, was Taylor's first record as a full-time drummer. Even though he only played on a small part of the record, he said that the red light made him worried in the studio. How stressful it is when the recording studio light comes on. Nevertheless, this marked the start of a strong relationship with Grohl. Dave used to be Nirvana's drummer, so he knew exactly what he wanted in a drummer. Although Taylor had looked up to Grohl since he was a teenager, he brought a new energy to the band. The Foo Fighters were making waves by the early 2000s. All My Life and Times Like These, from the 2002 album One by One, were big hits. They were a sign of recovery after a nearly broken up and tense recording sessions. Taylor was not only a drummer. He helped create a sound that was both precise and wild, combining arena rock power with unwavering authenticity. He co-wrote and organized the music. Foo Fighters became one of the most famous rock bands in the world over the next few years. They won many Grammys, sold a lot of records, and played some of the biggest stages in music history. With his golden hair, powerful drumming, and undeniable stage personality, Taylor Hawkins was an important part of their success at Wembley, Glastonbury, Lollapalooza, and Rock in Rio. But Taylor did a lot of other things besides Foo Fighters. He started writing his own songs, plus playing guitar and lead singing. In 2006, he formed Taylor Hawkins and the Coattail Riders. He wanted to find a band where he could explore a different, funnier, more creative side of himself. Red Light Fever and Get the Money, among others, showed that he was more than just a great drummer. He also joined a number of side projects, such as Birds of Satan, NHC, the cover band Chevy Metal, and some members of Jane's Addiction. He worked together a lot with famous artists like Elton John, Slash, Brian May, and Koida and Cambria. Taylor Hawkins was the drummer who added a unique voice to many songs. Beyond anything else, Taylor was the stage's heart. He didn't just play, he played music and told stories. Sometimes he switched places with Dave Grohl to sing lead. His performances of Queen's Under Pressure, Somebody to Love, and Led Zeppelin's Rock and Roll were often the best parts of every show. Taylor played on all of Foo Fighters' major albums for almost 25 years, from In Your Honor to Concrete and Gold to Medicine at Midnight, 2021. He once called that last record weird, experimental, and exhilarating. After becoming one of the most famous drummers in the world, Taylor Hawkins never stopped loving being in a house band. Untamed, free, and always making things. He did not play the drums for a living. It was the only way for him to really be himself. Every show, beat, and laugh he made became part of a musical heritage that can never be replaced because he lived that way. There was more than one person in the band who kept the beat. Fans have been super devoted to him for almost 30 years. Problems and addictions. Taylor Hawkins joked that he'd probably be carrying pizzas if he wasn't the drummer for Foo Fighters. It wasn't just modesty in that half-joking comment. It showed a truth. He didn't think of himself as a rock star who could not be touched. Taylor always felt like he was on the hunt for something, whether it was fame, love, or just the feeling of being free. There were times when he went too far because he never stopped running. When Foo Fighters started to become popular in the late 1990s, they went on a lot of tours. It's planes, rooms, stages, noise, and a lot of pressure to keep up rock energy night after night on tour after tour. The fame and disaster of Nirvana were nothing new to Dave Grohl. But this pace was hard for Taylor, who had just moved from being Alanis Morissette's backup drummer to a full-time part of a rising global band. It was 2001, and Taylor had been drinking all night in the UK. Right after a show at the V Festival, he took too much heroin. Everyone is confused about what happened. All that is known is that he wasn't awake the next morning. The doctors said he was really unconscious. For people who knew him, the memory is still like a bad dream. He was waiting by Dave Grohl's hospital bed. He was his friend, bandmate, and boss. I thought for a moment that history was happening again. He misplaced Kurt Cobain already. This time it looked like he might lose another brother. For the first time, Taylor saw himself when he woke up. He didn't change right away. He later said, "I loved doing drugs, but I lost control. I thought the story that live fast, die young was true, and it almost came true for me. Slowly, step by step, they got better." He stopped smoking, started working out, and became obsessed with mountain riding. It was a healthier addiction, but it still showed that he was always looking for something to fill a hole. To make his life more balanced, he paid more attention to his health and spent more time with his family. Although, for an artist who is always on the move, too much quiet could make them feel restless. Taylor began to worry about his physical limits when he was in his 40s. He told them he was scared of being on stage, not because of the lights, but because of his body. "I'm not 25 anymore," he told Rolling Stone. "People 20 years younger than me have to keep up with me every time I go on stage. It's like losing to someone my own age." Starting in 2018, people close to him started to notice changes. Yeti, Taylor's longtime drum tech, remembered a time when he lost a lot of weight, couldn't sleep, and looked totally worn out. He didn't eat regularly, worked out less, and always seemed stressed. Even though he never said anything bad in public, the changes were clear. The eyes were down, the speech was slower, and there were times when there was silence between laughs. By late 2021, Foo Fighters had a full schedule of shows after COVID. "I fell asleep on a plane one night and had to be brought back to life with 4 fluids." Chad Smith, drummer for the Red Hot Chili Peppers, says that when he didn't show up at the show in Abu Dhabi, Taylor finally had to face the ultimate limit. Feeling well. Close friends say that soon after, Taylor had a private talk with Dave Grohl and the band's management in which he asked for a lighter tour schedule. He said, "I can't go at this speed any longer. We must resolve this issue." However, Foo Fighters camp turned down any official request. Everyone either didn't say anything or said it was just a thought and not a real question. The important thing is that Taylor never gave up, even though he was tired. In early 2022, he excitedly told Yeti, "I've hired a trainer. I'm working hard. I've gained 15 pounds. I'm finally doing it right." Those closest to him believed Taylor truly wanted to get back on track, to stay healthy, to restore balance. But sometimes, recovery arrives slower than the body allows, and Taylor Hawkins, though he had walked through the darkness, still carried scars not visible to the eye but never erased, even amid the thunder of his drums. He was an artist who lived with heartbreaking honesty. And like so many in that world, the price of truth is often the hardest to predict. Personal life. Taylor Hawkins was never the kind of artist who put his private life on display. He wasn't caught in romantic scandals, didn't cross over into media circuits, and rarely shared personal stories on talk shows. But to those who knew him well, Taylor was a deeply affectionate man, fiercely loyal to his family, and someone who lived with a simplicity that seemed almost surprising given the spotlight he had stepped into. In 2005, during a peak in his career with Foo Fighters, Taylor married Allison, the woman who stood by his side for more than 17 years. They weren't a red carpet couple, but in every chapter of his journey, from the stage to behind the scenes, Allison was there. Together, they had 3 children, including their daughter Annabelle, who directly inspired the song Middle Child, featured on Taylor's solo album, Get the Money. In it, he explored some of the most intimate facets of being a suburban dad. Get the Money wasn't just a fun side project. It was a brief but heartfelt declaration. Taylor wasn't only the drummer in a legendary rock band. He was a man who drove his kids to school, spent evenings playing guitar in the garage, and occasionally drummed with friends' cover bands at local events. He once said, "I know I'll never be a Freddie Mercury or a Dave Grohl, but I can be a good dad, a funny husband, and a nice neighbor. That's enough for me." When not on tour, Taylor lived in Topanga Canyon, a quiet wooded area in California where the air smelled of pine and the hills rolled endlessly. There, he built a small home studio, working independently, jamming with friends, writing, recording, sometimes just for fun. Neighbors described him as cheerful, often seen biking in the mornings, greeting everyone, never acting like a rock star. Yet, as a sensitive artist, Taylor carried his share of insecurities. In one rare interview, he confessed to feeling overwhelmed by his role. "But a lot of times I just want to go home, sit with my daughter, and watch cartoons." Taylor loved his wife, his kids, and his fans. Of his own accord, people knew him for always signing autographs, never saying no to a picture, and most of all, never taking his fans' love for granted. A popular story from before he died is about a 9-year-old girl named Emma Sophia who played for her idol with a toy drum kit outside of his hotel. Not only did Taylor come down to take a picture with her, he also talked to her, encouraged her, and gave her what many people called the nicest smile of the day. Taylor made Emma's day better, even though it was meant to be her worst, Emma's parents said. He was well known without big shows or awards that stood out. People will remember Taylor Hawkins not only for how well he played the drums, but also for how he lived his life as if music were real, easy, and able to touch hearts. For example, he would say nice things to people, pat them on the back, or give his daughter a hug in the middle of the night. To show that he was a good father, he didn't need an award. People who live from the heart don't have to prove anything. Last year's, Taylor Hawkins was no longer the fiery young guy running across the stage when he was in his 50s. My hair was blowing in the wind. As long as his drums were playing, he still had an amazing life force that made people stand up. On the inside, though his body and mind had started to send him distress messages, Taylor felt more confused than ever after the COVID-19 pandemic. When Foo Fighters came back with the record Medicine at Midnight and the horror comedy Studio 666. Basically, he wanted to keep going. He lived for music, but his busy routine was wearing him down mentally and physically. He stated that he was scared of the stage and wasn't as sure of himself as he used to be. "I'm no longer the kid who is 25 years old. It feels like I'm just trying to stay alive in every show." Taylor lost consciousness on a trip to Abu Dhabi in late 2021 and had to be brought back to life with 4 fluids. The show didn't happen. It seemed like that event was a sign. According to Red Hot Chili Peppers drummer Chad Smith, Taylor told Dave Grohl and the band's managers, "I can't keep doing this. We need to make some changes." As Taylor Hawkins got older, he wasn't the fiery young man who ran across the stage with his hair blowing in the wind. Despite everything, he still had an amazing life force. Crowds still got up when his drums started playing. On the inside, though his body and mind had started to send him distress messages, Taylor felt more confused than ever after the COVID-19 pandemic. When Foo Fighters came back with the record Medicine at Midnight and the horror comedy movie Studio 666. Basically, he wanted to keep going. It was music that made him happy. But on the other hand, his busy routine was wearing him down. Emotional and physical. He stated that he was scared of the stage and wasn't as sure of himself as he used to be. "I'm no longer the kid who is 25 years old. It seems like every show is a race. I'm only trying to stay alive." Taylor lost consciousness on a trip to Abu Dhabi in late 2021 and had to be brought back to life with 4 fluids. The show didn't happen. It seemed like that event was a sign. According to Red Hot Chili Peppers drummer Chad Smith, Taylor told Dave Grohl and the band's managers, "I can't keep doing this. We need to make some changes." 7:40 minutes later, an ambulance showed up. Even though paramedics tried CPR, Taylor Hawkins was already dead. Forget the drums, the naughty smile, and the eyes that sparkled under that long blonde hair. His death happened right there. He was 50 years old. The sad news came from the band at 9:59 p.m. late that same night, not long after thousands of fans found out the show wouldn't happen. The audience stopped talking. The music ended. It was just lights and tears left. The public's response and unanswered questions. Finding out that Taylor Hawkins had died suddenly on March 25, 2022, shocked the rock world and sent painful shockwaves around the world. Foo Fighters were going to play at the Estéreo Picnic Festival stage in Bogotá, and thousands of people were still there waiting. Not knowing that the drummer of the band had died just an hour before the lights went down, they were shocked. Instead of the loud drum beat going on forever, there were whispers and then choked sobs. The stage wasn't being used for performances anymore. A memorial for a person who died while playing the game he loved most was set up there with hundreds of lights. Foo Fighters quickly canceled the rest of their South American tour dates. They said, "The Foo Fighters family is devastated by the sudden and tragic loss of our beloved brother Taylor Hawkins," in a short but heartfelt statement. "We will always remember how much he loved music and laughing." Quickly, the word got around, and famous artists paid their respects in their own unique ways. Taylor was a great guy and a great musician, according to Ozzy Osbourne. Travis Barker told the reporter, "I don't know what to write. It's not enough to say I miss him. Happy to see you again. While smoking, we'll talk about drums." The next week, Billie Eilish was at the Grammys. During her show, wore a shirt with Taylor's face on it. The singer Miley Cyrus filled in for the Foo Fighters at Lollapalooza, Brazil, and dedicated her whole set to Taylor, crying on stage. Taylor looked up to Roger Taylor of Queen, and he shared a picture of himself with his son Rufus, who was one of Taylor's favorite students. Led Zeppelin's Jimmy Page shared a picture of himself performing with Taylor and talked about how he saw his younger friend's technique, energy, and pure innocence. But the sadness quickly gave way to something else. Thoughts. Swift Hawkins had been through a lot of close calls. In 2001, he overdosed on drugs and went into a 2-week coma in London. Ever since then, he has worked hard to live a healthy life, working out hard and getting regular checkups. It was only a few months before he died that he told Rolling Stone, "I just had a full checkup. The medical professional told me I'm in great health. These long-distance workouts make my heart big." What really took place? Unsettling information was found in an investigative report from Colombia. Taylor's heart was 600 grams heavy, which is almost twice as heavy as a regular heart. He had more than 10 drugs in his blood, such as opioids, tricyclic antidepressants, benzodiazepines, THC, and others. Some news sites said that something that looked like cocaine was found in the room, but this was later taken out of the prosecutor's official statement. The uncertainty made things even less clear. Fans were still upset about the death when, in May 2022, Rolling Stone released an investigation. Taylor told close friends like Matt Cameron of Pearl Jam and Chad Smith of Red Hot Chili Peppers that he felt like he was about to pass out because of Foo Fighters' crazy tour schedule. He had asked management to make it easier on him. The story says Taylor said, "I can't take it anymore." But a few days later, both Cameron and Smith said they were wrong and that their words had been taken out of context. The band's managers stayed quiet during this time, adding to the chaos. Fans became split. Some people thought it was a terrible accident because the person was a former drug addict whose body was worn out from years of doing intense shows. Some people thought Taylor had tried to speak out, but was ignored by the fast-paced showbiz business. Later, a final message from Taylor to his close friends, the Ferals, was found. It was a poison pill for those who were left behind. "Make sure you look out for each other, okay? I'm going to take care of myself. I look forward to seeing you in Sao Paulo. I love you guys." It wasn't a goodbye. It was a promise. A promise he couldn't keep. Taylor Hawkins' death remains without clear answers. No one can say for certain what happened. All we know is that a man who once beamed behind his drum kit, who bent down to sign an autograph for a 9-year-old girl in Paraguay, who dedicated an entire album to his daughter, quietly fell just before showtime. Perhaps he was simply exhausted. Perhaps he was still trying. And perhaps in his final moments, he still believed the show would go on. And that perhaps is the true tragedy. Legacy and impact. Taylor Hawkins was never the kind of person who sought titles. He never demanded the spotlight, nor did he need grand praise to validate his place. Yet when people speak of the greatest drummers of the modern era, names like John Bonham, Neil Peart, or Roger Taylor, Taylor Hawkins often appears quietly among them. Not because of superhuman technique, but because of the wild, sincere spirit he poured into every strike of the drumstick. Taylor wasn't just the timekeeper for Foo Fighters. He was the band's second heartbeat. If Dave Grohl was the brain and soul, then Taylor was the lifeblood, the one who brought energy, fire, and vitality to every performance. He didn't just play drums, he lived inside them. Each beat was a piece of himself, a piece of his heart, and a part of that bright, messy smile that always peeked out from behind his wild blonde hair. His technique was a fusion of classic rock fire and grunge freedom, polished yet instinctive. He could make stadiums quake with The Pretender or All My Life, and just as easily step back, holding a steady groove for Grohl to take the lead. The ultimate bandmate. Beyond drumming, Taylor was also the front man of his own band, Taylor Hawkins and the Coattail Riders, where he showcased his songwriting, vocals, and stage presence on his own terms. The album Get the Money, 2019, was a clear reflection of that. Playful, introspective, filled with love for his family, and laced with the rebellious spirit of someone determined to live on his own terms. He also performed with Alanis Morissette and appeared as a guest on projects by Slash, Brian May, and Elton John, a trusted collaborator in the global rock scene. Taylor was a bridge between generations of artists. He revered legends like Roger Taylor and Jimmy Page and became a role model to younger stars like Billie Eilish, Miley Cyrus, and countless young drummers who once stood in awe watching him perform. After his passing, many didn't just remember him as a musician, but as a mentor, a friend to all, always willing to talk, share, and encourage. But perhaps the greatest legacy Taylor Hawkins left behind wasn't found in charts or records. It was in how he inspired others to live fully and authentically. He was once the fat, dumb kid nobody liked who believed he would never amount to anything. Until he picked up a pair of drumsticks and found what made him come alive. He lived fast, lived honestly, loved his kids so deeply he wrote an album for them, hugged young fans like family, and stepped outside just to take photos with a few people drumming on the sidewalk. Taylor didn't build monuments, but he left real footprints in the hearts of those who heard him play, saw his smile on stage, and mourned when he was suddenly gone. And like a drum solo, brief, maybe cut short, but played with every ounce of soul, it stays in the listener's heart forever. That's the kind of legacy Taylor Hawkins created. Taylor Hawkins didn't fade away like a star losing its light. He departed like the final thunderous strike in a rock song that ended too soon. He once said, "I don't want to preach about not doing drugs because I loved them, but I lost control and it almost killed me." It was a confession without filters, without polish, a rare kind of courage, especially in a world where fame often demands a clean image. Taylor lived truthfully. He loved music like a child, loved his family like a devoted father, loved his fans like old friends reunited. And he left this world the same way he lived, without warning, without spectacle, but leaving behind a void no one could ever fill. Over 2 decades with Foo Fighters, deeply personal solo albums, explosive drum solos, tender voice messages to friends, all of it has now become memory. But not a sad memory. Rather, a reminder that some people don't need a full century to be remembered forever. If you've ever found yourself drumming along unconsciously to a Foo Fighters track, laughed watching Taylor hug his drum kit like a kid hugging a teddy bear, or felt a lump in your throat seeing his eyes during those final days, then maybe, in some way, you understand why Taylor Hawkins wasn't just a drummer. He was the heartbeat of an entire era. Share your favorite musical memory of Taylor Hawkins in the comments. And if you believe artists like him deserve to be remembered forever, like, subscribe, and ring the bell to keep these stories alive.